Science is not so much about having your publication. Science is about giving something back to society. That's the nice part about being a scientist. You get the freedom to just try to test it. And then it becomes fascinating. It's like a puzzle that you are finding another piece and another piece, and you move on to build your puzzle. If you will develop your weaknesses, you will become average. But invest your time in your strengths, because that's where you can really excel. That's also where you can find your happiness. You learn much more from your failures than from your success. You're not failing for nothing. My advice is never, ever give up on your family life because you want to be a scientist. The nice part is that as a scientist, you never work alone. You work in a group. Never say never. Keep this open-minded to the world. You don't know what will happen.
Sometimes the most meaningful careers aren't carefully planned. They unfold step by step. In this episode of Unblur the Path, I speak with Professor Ronit Shiri-Sverdlov, who shares how curiosity, resilience, and the right guidance shaped her journey into science and academia. From exploring genetics to leading impactful research, all while balancing family life. Her story offers a powerful perspective on finding your own path. Hi, Ronit. Welcome to Unblur the Path. It's such a pleasure to have you with me today, and I'm really hoping to learn a lot from you. Welcome again.
Very excited and very honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
The pleasure is all mine. Well, I want you to introduce your current job profile, and from there, we will take you to a time travel back in the day when you actually started thinking to be, what you're doing. I won't reveal much for our listeners right now before you do your revelations, and then we'll do a deep dive.
Okay. So I'm currently a professor at Maastricht University. I'm chairing the Department of Genetics and Cell Biology. And as part of it, I'm also, of course, involved in research in the field of oncometabolism. I'm involved also in education tasks and other daily HR-related things.
Wow. Being a professor, I'm sure it comes with a lot of learnings from me, to be honest, because I haven't interacted with many professors except the professors I was being taught by. So, not in my daily interactions, but yeah.
I don't think that a professor is different than any other daily interactions that you have. It's pretty much the same.
Okay. So let's explore the time when you actually thought that this is the field that I want to get into. I want to be into the education field. Or was it very well thought, or did it happen organically for you?
No, I would never envision this career path. Actually, education is also not something that I was ever aiming to, but this is something that is, of course, if you're having a position in the university, it's also brings you to education. So this is something that came to me along the way. But also research. No, it's something that just gradually developed. Never planned for that.
So how did it start? Like, I would like to take you to your very, very young years when you were still studying in your school. How did it all start?
I think I always had an interest in medicine in general. I don't know why. As a child, I loved I had just general interest. I invented games that are related to like my own hospitals and patients' care. So this was something that I always find fascinating. At school, I loved genetics. I was fascinated by how, in general, the human body is working and cells. I was impressed by how all these things are working, but I never really planned a career around it. I just decided, okay, let's study something related to that, and then we'll see what will happen with that.
So when you were growing up, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Tel Aviv.
Okay.
In neighborhood of Tel Aviv. Yeah.
You finished your school. What was the next step? How did you embark on a career? What was your, first step towards getting into this career?
I actually first wanted to study medicine, but that didn't work out that well. Also because I was accepted to university that was too far from my house, and I was never the type to really make this step to travel each day that far. So I decided to study what we call today biomedical sciences. This was more general biology. I was also there not too fascinated by what I've studied. So it was, I think for me, also because I suffer from concentration problems, it was okay, but it wasn't like, wow, it was okay. I studied because I'm already on this path, but I'm not sure I was the happiest.
Okay. Okay. So, how was your first education, like the graduation, like the studies that you do in your first college?
I think it was too general. So to me, that was too much. It was really just providing us with knowledge. And it was not a problem for me, but there was not really so much added value in that. But then before the exams, you mainly needed to memorize everything.
Right.
And that was not a problem, but it also didn't feel like you're really actually studying something. So I didn't like this way of just providing you with knowledge and you have to memorize it and to show that you know it. It didn't work out for me that well, this type of education.
Okay. Then how did you do a postgraduate after this to, enhance your.
Yes. So the master was also more practical. So there I had also like a project that was also not, I liked the topic. It was, identifying some compounds from the Red Sea that can be used to treat leukemia. So I thought, okay, has high potential. But I wasn't happy there because I think if I look back, giving I didn't receive really the opportunity to work on my skills and to develop my skills. It was more like, okay, this is what you have to do it like this, report back to us the results, and then we will analyze it and let you know what. I think during my master, my confidence only deteriorated. That didn't help much. I didn't feel like I gained more confidence, no knowledge, because I mainly repeated the same things. So yeah, it was more practical, but yet I wasn't there.
Okay. So if I can take you back a little in your, bachelor's degree, what were the subjects that you were studying then?
So it was more general biology, physics, chemistry. Chemistry was a nice surprise for me because after not liking it in school, I discovered that in university that was my favorite topic. And I actually think it's because of the teacher. I think the teacher makes a very big difference if they know how to. At least there was one teacher that was really, I don't know, somehow he made it very interesting because he made it also more challenge based. So instead of just giving us the knowledge, there was always a challenge and working around solving problems. And I really like this approach more.
Okay. And how long was your bachelor's degree?
So the bachelor was for 4 years.
Okay. And then your master's, what was your subject of specialization?
So the master was 2 years and the specialization was cell biology.
And then after master's, did you immediately went into doing your PhD or did you get any work experience in between?
No, I immediately went to do my PhD because I didn't really know what to do with the master otherwise. So, and I'm afraid I actually thought like, well, if I would restart, probably I would choose something completely different, but I didn't dare to restart again after all the efforts. And so I just continued on this path.
Okay. And your PhD was like, what was the subject or the topic?
So the PhD was also like identifying the spectrum of mutations related to genes related to breast and ovarian cancer in the general population. I liked it very much also because it was actually contact with patients. So I was also like, you meet with the patients as a genetic counselor in the oncogenetic unit. And that was nice because you could really see the implications of your work and what do people do with that. When you identify new mutation, you can test directly in specific ethnic groups in the population. I really liked it. And I think it's also related to the fact that I had an amazing supervisor who was also a mentor. So that was a big gift for me.
Amazing. So, through your education from your bachelor's to your PhD, what was the most exciting part for you?
The most exciting part. I think the parts, I don't know if exciting will be the right word, but I think what I liked the most was the contact with the patients, where you see that you are actually meaningful. I will not say exciting because, of course, sometimes it was really hard to, you see people that all of a sudden get some information that changes their life. So sometimes that was really hard, but that's where I felt that it's most meaningful.
Right. Yeah, meaningful would be the word. Yes. And if I can just quickly ask you, what was your the most challenging part of when you were doing your education?
The most challenging part during my education, you mean PhD or in general?
In general, yeah.
In general, I think during the bachelor and master, it was mainly the concentration issues that I had that were never really diagnosed, but they were very severe. And then, of course, during my master, I already became a mom. So you needed to combine everything to find the time. During my PhD, I had my second child. So you still have to find a way to combine everything to feel that you are in control still of on top of knowledge. As a scientist, you want to be on top of knowledge, but that means reading new papers, finding time to that. But in between, having the work in the lab, being with the patients and being a mom. Yeah, you need to find the right balance for that.
We'll talk more about work-life balance and family life balance later. But yes, I do understand because I think in all the discussions or conversations that I've had, you are the first who has managed her studies along with marriage and kids. So I'm definitely going to talk about it because I'm sure it was challenging, but exciting at the same time. Let's move on from your PhD to your job. I said in the beginning, it's a very new area for me to explore. How do you get your first job once you finish your PhD? What are the challenges? What are the preparations, or how do you connect to people? If you can just elaborate on that.
If I say that, that sounds really, really not updated, but this is what I did back then. So my husband received a job in Maastricht. I was back then a mother of two. And I thought, okay, if we have to move and I'm anyway finishing my PhD, then it's nice to look for a postdoc position in the same city so that I will combine it for a year or two. And then when I go back to Israel, continue my career. So I looked into the university in this small city, Maastricht, and there is one university. I was like genetics, so I decided to look up for the people that are doing genetics, and I actually it's really amazing. But I walked into the university, looked for the Department of Clinical Genetics. The university was under constructions back then, so I could not even come to the department eventually, but I met the chair of the Department of Genetics and Cell Biology, and I just talked with him, and that's how I got my job, which is kind of like not how you normally do that. I didn't
Right.
even plan a meeting,
Yeah.
but I was lucky.
Okay, that's fantastic. You already did a bit of research in your PhD and your master's programs as well. But how was it when you started working as a scientist in the university? How were your first few days?
Very difficult. First of all, apart from the cultural differences that you need to adapt. It's a new country. You have your also children. You have to take care of all this. I switched fields, so I lacked a lot of knowledge. I had a severe imposter syndrome. It was challenging because I needed to, I was hired with a lot of expectations and I needed to live up to these expectations. So at the beginning, it was very hard. There were a lot of new things for me. And every day I came back home and I needed it felt like, okay, I can be myself, or sometimes go and check things that I didn't understand during the meeting and to catch up with. It was quite a challenging period. At least the first year was quite hard.
Okay. You mentioned that there was a change of subject. What was the new subject that you were working on?
So when I first met this person, I want to mention his name, and unfortunately he passed away, Professor Martin Hofker. And when we first met, I showed my interest in genetics. I like more clinical genetics, but of course with the language barrier, there was less options to do something with patients. He said, okay, yeah, of course, you can have projects related to genetics, but we also have projects related to metabolism that may be more interesting for you. And I said, no, I don't want to go to this field. He asked whether I want to do preclinical studies also with mice, for example. I said, no, it's not what I like. But eventually we agreed that I will do two projects, one related to genetics and at the same time a project related to metabolism. Yeah, I started to work on both of them. And at one point I needed to sort of like zoom in into one of them for like personal grants. And I selected more the metabolic part. So I find a new
Okay. So at this point, I'm curious to understand, how do you approach a subject? Now, if you can explain that this was a new subject for you, metabolism, how does a scientist approach a subject which is new to them, and how do they become a master of that?
I think that being new to something and doing something different was actually, although it was harder and more challenging, it was actually an added value because I looked at things from different perspectives and I came with the different, I would not say knowledge tools because I didn't feel that I had that much knowledge, but at least experiences that I could apply. And how you do that, you read papers and you ask questions. And at a specific point, you understand that there are some questions that are not being answered. And then you link it to observations that are being made in the lab. And you think, okay, that's interesting. What if this will, and then that's a nice part about being a scientist. You get the freedom to just try to test it. And then it becomes fascinating. It's like a puzzle that you are finding another piece and another piece. And what if? And yeah, it's a great feeling because then you test it and you move on to build your puzzle.
Okay.
Get other pieces.
Okay, so if I understand it, that you are given a topic and then you dive into it and figure out what are the gaps, and you have the freedom. Do you seek approval as well that this is the topic, this is the gap that I want to research upon now?
The nice part is that as a scientist, you never work alone. You work in a group. And in the beginning, you're assigned sometimes to a written project. That's at least how it started with me. But along these written projects, you identify your other things and then you discuss it in a group. It's never one person that is doing that. But you discuss ideas, you exchange ideas, you get input from different directions, and slightly the research changes, and you are part of this change.
Right.
And you get to new directions. So in science, it's like you know where you begin, but you never know when you end because you always have to be open-minded about what you find. And our project was more really related to, let's say, cardiovascular diseases and the link to the liver to cardiovascular diseases. But then, our focus shifted more to what we observed in the liver because there were interesting observations related to another liver disease. You slightly change because you just see something that you did not expect and you want to dive into that and you discuss it in a group and you continue further.
Wow. So I'm getting a little curious again on, once you've decided a particular topic that this is where I'm going to research, and since you are working on the biological side of things, how is the practical look like? Can you explain, probably taking one example of one of your projects, and take that example and explain me how would you approach it in the lab? How do you figure out your results? How do you take the results forward? And how do you then make it a published paper, or if I'm missing something in between? So if you can explain the process for anyone who's thinking that, okay, scientist is something that I want to be, what is it that they are looking, if they have to work on, say, one project to start with?
So if I understood correctly, you look for a specific example of how science develops.
Yes.
How do you?
To explain it better, I think.
For example, when I just started, it was the idea that it just started to be recognized that if you eat a lot of unhealthy food, you can also get inflammation in your liver. And it was this concept that you first have to accumulate a lot of fat in your liver, and then this fat will eventually lead to inflammation. That inflammation will then further deteriorate the liver. But what we observed, the mice were fed with this high-fat diet, and when we looked earlier enough, we could see that actually inflammation was there from the very beginning. So that, of course, changes the concept. You think like, okay, why is that starting early? If inflammation is then the trigger, and maybe it's not so much about the fat, maybe it's about the inflammation. So this is where you start rethinking ideas. Or, for example, if we see that when we take away the cholesterol from the diet, even though we have a lot of fat, all of a sudden something is changing, the inflammation is gone. Then you say, okay, cholesterol is interesting. Let's focus on this cholesterol. And then you start to think, where does this cholesterol goes to? And you observe it in the lab, make some experiments, and you see that it gets stuck in a specific suborganelle in the cell. And you ask yourself, why would it be stuck there? And what are the consequences? And how is that related to the inflammation? And why would some individuals have this and others not? And so this is how it goes to different direction. And eventually you come to a point of like, how can we develop it into a new treatment or into a new diagnostic tools? How can we take this knowledge and maybe test it in patients? Do we see the same in patients? How does it correlate to features of diseases? And then it's nice because you start seeing how some observation, random even, that you made in the lab, in cells, then you tested then in preclinical models, can be translated into the patients. And it's a fun process to be in.
Of course, of course. And quite a large impact on the society by the researchers that is done in the labs and then translates into helping patients. Now, if you can elaborate about once a particular research is kind of, I may not be having the right words, but maybe published or recognized that this is the right path to take, what is the next step? Do you work closely with pharmaceutical companies? How does it translate into helping the patients?
I'm really happy that you're asking these questions because I think it's a very relevant question. And I'm very happy that recently there is also a change in the way we evaluate science as society. Because science is not so much about having your publication. It's not about building your CV. That's what we should remember all the time. Science is about giving something back to society. We have, within the university, we have people who can help us with, let's say, translating our ideas into, for example, you need to write patents or to apply for patents so that later on you can do something with that, not because you want to make the money, that's not the idea, but you need to protect it so then pharmaceutical companies will be happy to further on take this idea later on. When you influence society, you are talking to clinicians because it's, you're working in an academic hospital, so you have clinicians also in your group and in the department, and you collaborate with them. And when they identify something, they can also implement it directly. So this is also, it's just like you always have to see that you transfer this knowledge further to the clinic, to education, and it's not just the idea of publishing it and then no one or maybe only scientists are reading it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm more interested in, that, your work is so valuable. The world should know how it's actually creating that impact. Instead of, like you correctly said, it's just not the publications that you're writing for. You're actually wanting to create that impact, and it is already doing the ripples.
Yes, and I'm really, really happy that the way we are evaluating research now has been drastically changed. So, for example, we are not evaluating young scientists for the number of publications or an impact factor of a journal. We are really evaluating them a lot more for societal impact. What did you do? And it can be anything that you really give something back to society.
Honestly, I had never looked at scientists as people who give back to society, and it kind of clicked in my head that, wow, this is the perspective we who are not scientists never had about the scientist community. So,
and that is changes. For example, we involve more and more patients in our design thinking also, and it comes to evaluating research proposals. So there's parts that you write also for the patients so they can also evaluate it, be part of the project, put their input. We have more and more discussions with pharmaceutical companies, and I think in the future it will become even more. This ties have to become closer because otherwise it's a waste of money, all our salaries.
I perfectly get that and appreciate it as well. So I'll take you back to the time when we were discussing your first year in the job. How did you progress in the next 10 years of being a scientist? How was your progression like?
I think the way to progress was very much dependent on my supervisor, That's why I want to stress it. Or not really, I don't know if you call it a supervisor, because I already was not a student, but it's more like the chair of the department. That he really he helped me identify my strengths. That was really important. At first, I told you I had this imposter syndrome. So each time I got something, I was still like, okay, wow, so happy I got this grant, but panicking like I cannot really deliver what I promised. It took me some years to really understand that I can trust myself, and that was really with the help of people around me. Um, that I think is really important process, and I'm stressing it especially for young people, because I'm also a mentor myself, and I see a lot of young people where it's difficult for them to identify their strengths, and also to at the same time to let go of your weaknesses and to accept them. This is something that came to me a bit later. At the beginning, I was more like trying to hide my weaknesses, but at a certain point, I realized like, okay, I can excel in my strengths. And that means that it's okay to let go of the weaknesses, because we are working in teams and other people maybe excel where my weaknesses are. So together we can complete each other. You get more confidence along the way when you find more things that you feel like you can do or you can complete. And along this journey, and you know how to do it better, and you have to build your reputation around. And so that's also really important in science, because you have to stay in this cycle of people who can collaborate with you and help to do science together.
Yeah. So, what is that skill that you thought was most helpful to you during these? I'll talk only about your first 10 years that helped you to grow, to help you to be your best. One skill or more than that.
It still remains difficult for me to talk about myself in settings like this. Okay, I have a lot of weaknesses, so just to make it a bit in balance. But I think my skills are, I'm very creative, and I can see the big pictures. I can connect the dots. I can see opportunities. I can have good strategy to plan stuff. I can be critical. It's mainly creativity, I guess.
And does this all skill which you just mentioned is also a function of lot of knowledge gaining, lot of reading? Because when you say you are able to connect the dots, or when you can see the big picture, does it also happen because you have spent a lot of time gaining knowledge about the subject?
No, don't think it's related to knowledge. And we are staying away from knowledge definitely at this period where everyone can gain knowledge so fast. There's no point. You don't have to learn all your life. Knowledge is changing all the time. As we speak, there are more publications that you can never be on top of. So the idea is that when you want to do something, then you check all the relevant information that you want to check. I don't think it's related to knowledge. I think it's more related to application of knowledge. So you can know less, but you need to know the important points, what is known, what is not known, and be critical somehow and knowing how to apply.
Right, right. Now I get it. So you also mentioned in your answer that you are a mentor and you help realize the skills of a person who's your mentee. How do you do that? What are the things you look? How do you actually figure out that, okay, this particular person has this skill? Is there a way? Is there a structure to it?
First of all, I'm very happy that you're asking me specifically about this this role in education, because this is my favorite. Everyone has their own style to do that. If I have to define myself in one word, I'm a mother. So I think this is the approach that I also take with my mentees. I'm bringing my natural maternal skills. It's something that if you have so many students for so long, you learn to see faster than the student themselves see, because of they lack confidence. By now, I can talk to a student in 5 minutes, and I can see what their soft skills are. I'm not talking about, of course, if you want to really investigate other things, okay, that requires a bit maybe more time. But soft skills, like, for example, communication or creative, this is something that you can assess quite quick.
Okay.
And when I identify a skill, of course, I discuss it with the mentee and I see what they think. And quite often they say, "Oh, yeah, I also thought so, but I wasn't sure." And then, together we build a way of, okay, how can you develop these strengths further? What can you do? And how can you assess it later? And how can you adapt your plans to further develop it? And what is your vision to your career? What do you want to do?
And how do you identify the weaknesses they may have and guide them to subdue the weaknesses while they are working?
Weaknesses are easier to identify because especially young people, when they lack confidence, they immediately tell you like, okay, I think most of us sometimes the thing is that we see something as weakness when it can also be a strength. That's what I can help them. But people are like, okay, I have problems with organization, for example. I'm not that organized. They immediately put it on the table. Like I always think with weaknesses, you have to give it to, because if you will develop your weaknesses, you will become average. So that's okay to invest in it to become average. You cannot have something that will eventually interact with your work, but you will never really excel in something that you started already low. So always think, okay, if you need to improve it a little bit, if it's not still on an average level, then improve it that it will become average. But then invest your time further in your strengths because that's where you can really excel. That's also where you can find your happiness because you can feel that you can actually contribute.
Yeah, that's profound. That's a very nice way of explaining how to, work on your weaknesses and strength.
And accept it. That's really nice.
Yeah.
For me, being open about my weaknesses really released the ball. Took time, took longer than I should have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good advice as well. For people who are listening, it's easier to know your strength, but accepting your weakness is also very important to acknowledge and work on it. So, at what point in your career did you become a professor besides doing the research work?
So, like after being a postdoc, there's a track that you are first like assistant professor, and then you're associate professor, and then you are professor. For that, become full professor. There are no strict criteria, but you are in a program. You're being, let's say, visual within the scientific community internally and externally. And at one point, it just naturally comes, and then you have to take more of management tasks. I think that comes with age also.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you can explain me your career progression a little more in detail, like you start as a scientist, then you said assistant professor, take on management work. What does your career look like in the last, say, 10 years, if I can put it that way? And the progression, of course.
I think in research, there's always progression. You move from, for example, I started with being focused more like an obesity and metabolic syndrome. I, in the recent years, more involved in oncology. So your research is changing all the time based on your observation. And that's also important for people to know. You know where you start, you don't know where you end. So don't worry about what you do now. It doesn't mean what you will do in the future. When it comes to education, at least in my faculty, you have to all the time change educational roles. So you are involved in all types. Like currently, I'm still coordinating the Master Biomedical Sciences. Next year, I'll take a new challenge. So this is changing all the time based on what you like and what is available. Management-wise, you also take several tasks. Sometimes the faculty asks you to take several tasks. And I think there you're also developing, like your leadership skills are being developed because the more you have to lead people, the more you are also involved in stuff that you are not really trained for, but you have to fulfill, and you gain experience and within time. So you have to somehow divide your time between like research, education, management.
Okay. And how does your day look like? If you can describe, like you start your day, how does it start and how do you end? And when do you start and when do you end?
The nice part that I can say about being a scientist, there are also like lots of disadvantages, but one disadvantage is the flexibility. So one day doesn't look like the other day. There is one thing in this work that is really very, very different. There are days that are more research oriented when we are just zooming in on research, and it's a lot of fun. Probably you can tell this is my passion, so
Yeah.
it's fun. There are other days that there's also more education. There are other days there are a lot of management, for example, in the department of HR, things that needs to be done. I'm not anymore in the lab myself, but there are days where you are in all types of committees that you have to do. A lot of meetings. I think by this age, unfortunately, it's like meetings, meetings, meetings. So my agenda is really full. That makes it hard, of course, because then I'm always behind. So there's all the emails that I still have to do. The emails that comes with the to-do list that you have to find time to do. You have PhD students that needs to write their thesis or whatever, you have to be involved. You have to give feedback for people writing papers, for people writing grants, for yourself writing grants in your group, for all types of committees where you are yourself reviewing other grants or reviewing papers. Committees, for example, I looked into yesterday, I was in Platform for Scientific Integrity. So all types of other jobs that you do that is related. So every day is slightly different, but it's also gives me a lot of flexibility in planning my days. I can work from home sometimes. So it's flexible, but it's very busy. And you can take a lot of days off and practical that you have a lot. But of course, every day off that you take, there is a punishment because all your work just accumulates to the next day. So that's how it works.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you don't do, of course, much of labs right now. So, how does a research work under you progress? How do you take care of it now?
In my group, there are also postdocs and PhD students and master students and technicians. So we have research meetings. We have our regular research meetings with everyone involved. And we have also some in-depth research meetings, sometimes for the entire department, for example, coming Thursday. Sometimes it's just for our group where it's intense, only dedicated research day. And sometimes we have these research meetings. So every week, of course, we have meetings and a lot of personal meetings with PhD students, etc. You try to leave some of the work as much as possible for example, master students will be mainly on a daily basis be supervised in the lab by PhD students. And then they come, they say, okay, this is our findings. And then we discuss what should be done first and who to contact and what to do. And we divide the work and then we meet again. There's another progress meeting and we try to put all the dots together and make another plans and come back to that. We discuss papers, we discuss grants that we have to apply. We work together. It's fun because it's like in one big family. It's really fun to do.
Amazing. And how many research, like, of course, the numbers might change, but is there a certain set of number that you have to work on, or can you take more? Can you take less?
You're totally free.
Totally free.
You can, I think that's why you have a lot of freedom. So you can choose which tasks to take in yourself, which tasks not. You get a lot of, all the time, your email is exploding with join for that, do that, do that. Do you want to collaborate with that? Let's write this grant. There's another opportunity. And it's always that you have to find the balance to yourself, like learning to say no, because otherwise it's really, really tough. There are actually no really clear, that's the academic freedom, right? We don't have a clear criteria to anything. No, you can decide. So on one hand, you have all the freedom in the world. On the other hand, you have a lot of work. So you have to have a lot of personal intrinsic motivation to actually do your work properly, because otherwise, of course, you have permanent position and you can also do almost nothing, but that's not the idea.
So, does a particular department like yours, they work in isolation, or do you also have to work with, say, the physics department or the chemistry department, or the other departments of the university?
No, it's excellent questions. Actually, we are, so for example, in my faculty, we have different research institutes, different departments, very complicated scheme of how we work. And we work across research institutes, across departments, across, of course, also outside with our external collaborators on a national and international level. You are totally free. There are no borders.
Okay. And does this become a challenge sometimes, like communicating with so many stakeholders?
Is if you don't know how to balance and prioritize. It's, I think, one of the, sometimes when it's hard for people to do that, that's also what I try to seek with the young people, tell them, okay, tell me what you have on your plate and let me help you to prioritize and to see what you don't do, what you maybe do when you have time, what you do on top quality, what you do on a little bit less, and accepting that you did the best you could under the circumstances, and that's okay, because otherwise you may very easily lose the focus, and that's not the idea. So you have to learn to be focused and to understand that it's not possible to do everything all the time. Not any opportunity on your way you should take.
We have spoken that you have been a professor. Now, if I can take you, just being scientist is a part of being what you are also, right? A professor also. I want to understand the professor side of things, collaborate with kids. How do you talk to them in terms of their research? How do you guide them? Now you are the mentor. So how do you take them forward? What's your approach to all of it?
So that means that you are in the lead of a lot of things. You have to determine the research line. You are responsible for obtaining the money for research. So that's what you have to do with grants applications. And you are responsible for the development of the line. You are responsible for all publications, everything, the quality of it, the integrity of it. So from the research perspective, that means that you are in the lead and deciding what will happen, quality, the storyline of what you put, how you put it, where you put it. It also means that you are responsible for young people in terms of helping them with their career, with what they do. For example, like as a chair of department, sometimes HR, general problems that people have all the time. You are responsible for handling that, for making sure that people around you are happy, that they are in a healthy environment where they can grow and develop and feel comfortable. So it's just that you get more, I guess, across your career, you get more leading positions, and sometimes you have less time for the daily tasks because you are more in the bigger picture.
Okay. Okay. And when students, these are young people who are still building their career, their understanding of you, I'm sure there would be times when they would meet some kind of disappointments in terms of the work they are doing, the research they're working on. How do you handle that for them? And the second part of the question is, has there been moments of disappointments in your career? And how did you handle it for yourself?
Okay, maybe I will start with the second question. Of course, this is science. You try something and sometimes you get the opposite of what you expect. And sometimes you think, okay, there's another opportunity. Let's make this lemon into lemonade because actually it tells us this and this. Sometimes there are disappointments when there is a big grant proposals where you're working on for a full year and you're getting into this another step, and towards the end you are losing it. That's hard. So of course, the first, I don't know, a couple of days, I'm very upset and it's not fun. Yeah. Then you give yourself 2 days to be a bit upset, and then you have to continue and you think about the next challenge. What do I tell the young students? I tell them that they have to be prepared for that. They have to have this resilience. They have to understand. And that's why I also said it's not good to be perfectionist, because then you cannot accept failure. You have to understand that not everything is perfect. And then you have to keep in mind that you learn much more from your failures than from your success. You're not failing for nothing. Failure is a definition that we put. What is failing? You can not obtain the grant for many, many reasons. It doesn't mean that your research is not good enough. You can never take it personally. You just have to look for the next opportunity and learn from that. Okay, maybe next time when I will apply, I will use this strategic or that. Everything, every little failure along your career is an opportunity to grow. So take it as part of it. It's a package deal.
Thank you.
But then when the moment that you are successful, these are like, wow,
Wow.
it's great.
No, thank you. That's a very brilliantly put answer. And how is like success measured in your part of the world? What is considered good work, or how do we measure it?
This is what is currently being changed with a new reward and recognition vision that I'm very, very happy that is finally happening. Still have some issues, but I think we are on a way to make a difference there. Success is seen on several parameters. First of all, objectively, you have to look into the impact that you have. So impact in education, for example. What do you do in your roles in education? Not only that you fulfill your, let's say, your rules, but also like the quality of what you do, but also in research. Are you in the lead, as you recognize as a leader in research, or as part of a team that is leading a specific research? What are you doing for society? Also, of course, about leadership. What type of leader are you? Are you a team worker? I think this is the change, because before it was mainly building your CV of how many publications do you have, what is the impact factors, and how much money did you achieve for doing your research. And this is a very egocentric way of looking into that, because people then get the idea of like, I'm building my CV, that's my job. I'm better if I have more publications. And that's, of course, very deceptive and very dangerous. And now it's more like, okay, We are working in teams. It's not about recognitions of individuals. It's about teamwork. It's about research integrity. Also, for example, reporting on negative results is also something that is important. And it's about leadership. How are people around you? How do you treat everyone? People that are maybe yours, at all levels.
Yeah.
What type of, I think that's also really important.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. When it comes to grant money, when it comes to bringing money to university, now these are concepts which I very vaguely know. So, what are these concepts like getting the grant for a particular project? If you can explain that. And what does it also mean that getting money for the university? What does that mean?
It's really hard. Why? Because writing grants is very competitive, obviously, because only a very small percentage will receive it. So it's not enough just to have a great research. You need to be lucky as well. It depends who is in the committee. They could like your research maybe because, for example, I don't know, the disease that you are working on is more personally talking to them. Multiple reasons that are playing a role there, which means in practice that sometimes you put a lot of work and you don't receive it. And to put this lots of work, it's not enough that you say, okay, but you cannot work 9 to 5. It's a competition. And no one cares that you have children at home or that for half of your job you do education or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a competition. So you can work 80% on paper, but in real life, if you will not invest 120, you have no chance. So what's the point of even investing? So that means that you really have to be dedicated to that. And it means, no working hours because there is a deadline. So that could come on the weekend, in the evenings, and you want to do the best you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely best you can. Every time before deadline, there's a lot of pressure and you work exceptionally hard.
Yeah. And that brings me to the question which I earlier thought I'll talk later about is how was your work life balance through all the years when your kids were younger? Now that your kids are older, things must be different. But when they were younger, they needed more of your time. How did you manage such a cerebral work along with raising kids and family?
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot, particular because I have 4 children and a husband that is traveling a lot. So I get it a lot from young women, especially. I think that it's a question, first of all, there are several parameters. It's a question of balance for sure. You have to always keep your balance. You have to tell yourself that you do the best you can under circumstances, always. You have to receive some help. In my case, I really am super grateful for my parents who always were there by me and helped me whenever I needed and were flying to the Netherlands whenever I asked them. But you also have to have this passion to science as a hobby. And you have to have a passion of course, for children, because then you never see that as a burden. That's, of course, also important. If this is your passion, then it's much easier. And this is what I think the biggest secret is, to have a very clear prioritization in your head. For me, it's always was super clear. There's family and below is work. And when this is so clear in your head, it becomes much easier. It's much easier to say no when you not fly to a conference. It's much easier when you did not obtain a grant because whatever, maybe you could have done it better, but you couldn't. It's also easier when you receive a grant because then you have who to celebrate it with. You are never too much involved to a point that when results are not good, it will totally break you because you come home and then you totally shift gear. And the other way around. Yeah, it really helps you. So yes, you have to invest more time. Sometimes you have to be creative, waking up very early in the morning, doing stuff in between. I have some very sweet video of my boy from one of the grants that sometimes for when you write a grant, you also have to defend it. And I was practicing when one of my sons, which really likes science, he was still very young, and we had like this quality time that I do with each one of them. And then the deadline was very nearby, and I got stressed with like, how do I manage? And I told him, today we do the quality time is going to be research. I will practice for a presentation. You will ask questions. It's really funny to see such a young boy already doing the presentation by himself, asking questions. It's really like, so you learn how to, combine stuff, and it gives you lots of energy and joy. And I think it's really, really helps you. My advice is never, ever give up on your family life because you want to be a scientist.
Right.
If you think, I want a family, then along this you can build a scientific career. And it doesn't matter actually how far you are, whatever. You just have to enjoy what you do. That really helps.
That's a very, very beautiful answer, to be very honest, because the way you have spoken about prioritization and, keeping that very clear in your head, you will not regret that you missed an opportunity because, of course, your prioritizations are very clear. So that's a very, very important thing for anyone who's listening and wondering. And it applies to any career, just not being scientist. This applies to any career.
Any career. It's really, really important. I mean, it's like I always knew if I will not have for child, it was always like, should I go for it? And I thought, okay, this is something if I will not do, I will always regret. But you will never regret a grant that you did not receive. It's like, okay, it's over. It's past.
Oh, well put. Yes, that's so true. That's so true. Well, my next question to you is, in all these years, what was your most impactful research? What you think is the most closest to your heart?
I think the research that is close to my heart is is a specific observation that we made by which we could observe specific let's say pathways that occurs in the cell in pathological conditions that actually could be applied to any metabolic pathological condition that we can use for early diagnostics. So for example, these are specific biomarkers that we identified, and we could see that they are very early elevated during diseases. For example, right now we worked on liver cancer, and usually it is found on late stages. And when we are looking into this, we could see that they are very early upregulated. So they have really potential to help in early diagnosis, and of course then prevent further complications, but also that these same biomarkers, they have an importance when they are leaving the cells because their role is within the cell, but in pathological conditions, they are leaving the cells. And when they leave the cells, if you find this way of really targeting them outside of the cell and not inside of the cells, you can really reduce side effects. So that if you combine it, for example, with the immunotherapy or country, you can really enhance the efficiency of treatment while reducing toxicity. Why is that closest to my heart? Because this is something that started from, it's like this puzzle, like another piece and another piece and then another piece. And then you can look into that it's a story that I grew up with. And each time another piece. And of course, also then you see also other people working on similar stuff that you then continue to further develop because this is how science is working. And yeah, it's close to my heart.
Oh, one.
Science is like a baby, if you invest in it and it's like, okay, you have to like what you do. It's not like, of course, children are always the best, not to be comparable in the level of how much, but it's like, it's your heart. You have to put your heart there. It's not just a job that you can not care about.
That's so beautiful. And why I'm impressed by this is that, you are able to know a problem well in advance by looking at the biomarkers. Do we already have an application of it or is it still waiting?
So we have actually written some patent applications about that. I try to take it now in a stage where we are trying to take it into clinical trials to test it along current biomarkers. And we are collecting patients. So I did have some other studies that also, are like, okay, we're also tested into the, let's say, in the clinic. But this is something that I foresee a big potential, especially also with the treatment eventually. Of course, there we have to first, before it has been taken, diagnostic is easy to test in patients, but the treatment, of course, that will take longer. But I do see that focusing specifically on this marker outside of the cells, I do think that can be really opening doors for the future treatment. And I'm very excited about what it will lead.
Brilliant, brilliant. While I was doing a bit of Google research on you, I saw that, you have about 185 publications on Google Scholar. And I was like, wow, this is so impressive.
You
How
know it better than me. I'm not checking this
you are
stuff.
just doing your work.
If you say so, I believe you.
Probably more. I may be quoting a wrong number there, but yeah, I was so impressed by it. How do you keep track of all these publications that you've done, and I'm sure a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of cerebral energy has gone into making those papers what they are. Do you keep a track that they are having an impact somewhere, they are getting applied? Do you keep track of that?
You can very easily, you check the citation, so
Yes.
how many times it was cited. That is, of course, the more paper has been cited, the more you know it has been used in research, because it's like when you want to test something, you first have to check what is currently known, and then you build on that. It's like that you want to build a wall, and you can put the next stone only when there are already stones below. So when you see that your paper has been cited many times, this is where you know that's what counts, much more than how many publications you have. So keep track on that. Only doing that when I'm needed to apply for another grant, and then I need to put my CV and show stuff. I'm not on a.
Right.
It's not. That's not the issue.
Okay. Yeah.
The issue is continuing further into applying the knowledge.
Right. That's so wonderful. I mean, I can't even begin to think what brilliance has gone into doing all the research, all
Well,
work that you have done.
but maybe I want to say, because you say the work that you have done, research is always something that is done with teams. I've been lucky enough to work along with people who are all share the same passion that I have. So it's shared work of everyone.
So that was brilliant, Ronit. Knowing your journey, it's eye-opening for me in many ways. You have mentioned quite a few times that you suffered with concentration issues. Now, what is it and how did you navigate with that and still, you're able to work, you're able to do so many things and so beautifully. How do you overcome that and how do you work with that?
So thing is, when I mentioned before that there are like, I've learned to, I've hidden my weaknesses. Concentration problem was one of them. It was hard for me, for example, as a student, when I was listening to lectures, even though I thought it's very essential that I will listen, I just cannot, I start dreaming in my head. I listen for 10 minutes and I try and I know it's very interesting, and then my mind goes somewhere else. Only with very brilliant lectures that I could really follow the full lecture. But then after some time, it's like I need a break for myself. And so that was challenging. As a student, it just meant that there was a lot of pressure before exams because I needed to study everything from the very beginning and on a very fast, just 2 days before the exam, memorizing everything. But also meant that after the exam, I felt like I don't know anything anymore, because if this is how you learn, then you lose the knowledge. So that's really helped further. For sure, it was a major contribution to my imposter syndrome. I've learned to deal with that along the way. First of all, practically with admitting it to myself, and then making some, for example, if I have a full day of presentations, I know I cannot listen, then I make some deals with myself. Like, okay, I listen here, and then 10 minutes just do not listen. And so, and I try to, if people ask me question all of a sudden when I'm not listening, fortunately, I have this ability of like coming back with the last, 2 sentences, I can recall them and then I can answer. But sometimes it has been tough, especially when I was hiding it. I think I've learned to work with that better, because now, fortunately, I do mainly things that I like doing. And when you do stuff where you really enjoy, or the way I do that, then I don't suffer from that. But yeah, here and there you have to listen to a lecture where, and then I'm just sitting there and pretending to listen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get it.
And accepting that it is what it is. I couldn't help it.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you for being so honest about it, because there must be people who have the same issue and they must be working on dealing with it. And listening to you would probably give them some ideas to, like you said, you make a deal that, I listen to 10 minutes and then I would not listen and then come back to it.
And sometimes I just admit it. I just said, oh, I'm sorry, can you repeat what you just said? I was not concentrated. That also helps me.
Yeah, being honest about it. So the person will repeat very easily. That's a very easy solution. So thank you for sharing that. But I have a few more questions to ask you, which are more lighter. So if I was to ask you that if you have to give a message to your 20-year-old, what would that be?
Phew. I wish I could put this confidence that I have now in her. I really wish, because that will make my journey so much easier. When I would really believe in myself more, I would enjoy it much more.
If you have to go back, would you start the same work? Would you take the same career?
It's a very good question. Quite often I ask myself that maybe one thing that I would change, because there are a lot of things that I like. One thing that I would change is being probably closer to patient somehow. Probably if I would have the courage that I have now, I would study medicine and try to combine it with research.
Brilliant thought process there. What is the most rewarding part of your journey?
People. It's just one word, people. The people around me. It's just a pleasure. When you have to put so much time and you know, for example, sometimes students, you have to work on Saturday for whatever, they have deadlines for submitting their thesis. You really have to like them. You have to like the people that you are with, and it has to feel like family, because that's where you can really, because it's like running a marathon. You know, you need energy for a long time. You can only receive it from the people around you. And when it's fun to do work together, when you trust each other, this is where you can continue that for a long time. So anyone that is looking for a job, look for the people around you much more than what the topic is, or what the rest will come from itself. You need to be around people who will help you develop yourself and recognize your contribution.
Right. I'd asked you the challenge about the education years earlier. If I'll have to look at your career path, what would have been your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge was really everything that I did before my PhD. When you just are supposed to get knowledge and then show that you have this knowledge, it's boring, it's meaningless, and I don't consider that education. And that for me was, I think, also the reason why I really suffered, because I felt like I don't learn anything. It's not the way to go. Education is really about working in teams on a shared societal problem.
Okay, yeah, that's quite deep if I look at it. If you had an opportunity, what would you change in the education system? Primary,
Lot.
secondary, or
Why would I not change? I really like to have it where people are, for example, discussing a specific societal problems, and you get people with interests or expertise from different fields, totally multidisciplinary, but also not just students, but also companies involved. For example, if we are in the field of biomedicine, then pharmaceutical companies being involved, maybe also citizens or patients, sitting together, tackling a problem from different direction, finding an approach and applying it. This is for me the best way to really teaching by doing. And of course, for some people like me with concentration problem, that speaks more. But I think in general, nowadays, when knowledge is so easily accessible for everyone on their phone, universities will not be relevant if we will not have very quick adaptations to putting knowledge aside, to working together, to applying it, to focus on innovation and whatever the AI cannot give us, creativity.
right, absolutely. What is the most essential skill that you think helped you throughout your career? Was it one or more than one? But that kept you moving, kept you going, kept you doing better and better in every research that you did?
First of all, it's not a skill, but you have to be ambitious, I think, because that's, of course, requires a lot of work. In terms of skills, I would point again to creativity. I think at least this was my niche, what I felt that I can contribute the most.
Perfect. And who says creativity doesn't go along with science? It's completely hand in hand.
I think creativity, yeah, of course, because science is, you have to move forward. So you have to look for the next step. Yeah.
We'll do some smaller rapid fire questions now. So, one book that you recommend anyone to read, and probably it hasn't helped you, impacted you in some way.
I have to be honest, I didn't read, unfortunately, a proper book in a long time, because I always have theses, grants, other things to read. I can say in general that I mainly like these sort of books that makes me think later, that I can learn something from. And Usually there are the books that are also related somehow to historical events that are happening. For example, I think one example that I now remember when I think about history is like I think it's called The Flying Kite.
Okay. Oh,
or
yeah. Kite Runner.
Yeah, The Kite Runner.
Yes.
That really influenced me. I liked it because you learn a lot. So it's describing a lot of daily situations between people, but also historical events. And I like it when a book is staying in me for some time and make me reflect.
That's one of my favorite books as well. Kite Runner. One thing every student who's aspiring to be a scientist should know about your profession.
You have to have resilience, for sure. And you cannot be too perfectionist, because if you are too perfectionist, you will at one point break. Sometimes you have to learn that you have to be perfectionist where it's really important, it matters, and other things that are less matters, which is usually not in the research itself, but other bureaucratical part or whatever, then you sometimes have to let go. You cannot always do everything to a maximal extent. So select what is the most important.
Okay. Two most important people in your career.
I would say two people in my career that really influenced me the most. One is my PhD supervisor, Professor Ethan Friedman, and the other one is the person that welcomed me to Maastricht, and that's the late Professor Martin Hofker. And both, because they did see me as a person, and they did really help me develop and believed in me.
Okay. So it's very important to have the right mentors in your life.
Most important, yes.
What's your guilty pleasure after a long day?
My guilty pleasure after a long day is just being housewife with the kids. I don't read my mails. I don't have to be connected to work. Just being with family. It's my guilty pleasure. Everything that I do, for me, strangely enough, if I have time to even just clean the house, it's my guilty pleasure. I love it.
Wonderful.
It's like, because I don't have to think with my brain. I can do the daily tasks. I just love it.
Right. That's so beautiful.
But it's a family, for sure.
Family for sure. Yes. One quote or mantra that you live by.
Maybe never say never, because if I look back and you would ask me, will you ever become a professor? I would say never. Will you ever, I don't know, leave your country and live somewhere else? I would say never. So keep this open-minded to the world. You don't know what will happen.
Right. One myth about your profession that you would like to bust.
I think that people have this idea, some people, that people at the universities or professors are being smart. I don't think so. I'm sorry to break everyone's hearts. I really don't think so.
That's
The average IQ is equal to the general population.
okay. That's quite
Sorry
honest.
for being so open, but that's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think that brings us to the end, and I have asked you all the questions that were on my mind. And it was wonderful having you here on it. I really, really enjoyed every minute of our conversation. I would really seek opportunities to talk to you in future because I think I can learn a lot personally from you. So it was wonderful having you here.
Me too. Thank you very much for all the compliments, although I'm not sure I really deserve them, but thank you anyway. And I truly enjoyed this interview with you. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking out the time. That was Professor Ronit Shiri-Sverdlov. And a reminder that careers don't have to be perfectly planned to be meaningful. What stayed with me is this. With her immensely cerebral work profile, she has beautifully managed her family with 4 kids. Her key mantra: prioritization of family over work. And that still never stopped her to have the innumerable achievements in her wide career span. If this conversation gave you a new perspective, do share it with at least one person who might benefit from it: a student, a parent, or someone finding things out. And don't forget to subscribe to Unblur the Path for more real stories that help you make more informed life and career decisions. Until next time.